I am Maureen Druin, Executive Director of Maine Conservation Voters and Maine Conservation Alliance. And I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to the Evening for the Environment. We come together each year to celebrate our shared work, making Maine a place where people and nature thrive. I'd like to begin by thanking our supporters, our host committee, and sponsors for making tonight's event possible, especially Bangor Savings Bank, Elliottsville Foundation, Northlight Foundation, Lee Auto Malls, Maine Beer Company, the Natural Resources Council of Maine, and the League of Conservation Voters. Thank you so much for your support. Friends, we are in a moment of uncertainty. The challenges we face to our climate, environment, democracy, and humanity are daunting. We are being tested. We are being targeted. People in power do not want us to have a voice. At this time, it's more important than ever that we stand together in solidarity. I am grateful for the many advocates and supporters in this room that, like MCA and MCV, are turning our shared values into civic action for the protection of our air, land, water, and climate future. Passing policies, electing leaders, and bringing people and organizations together to educate, inspire, and to advocate. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge the elected leaders in this room who have stepped up to defend hard-won progress on climate change and clean energy, who have said that they will uphold the law and ensure that protections for vulnerable people in Maine stay intact, and leaders who are fighting for our constitutional right to free speech and our ability to vote in fair and secure elections. And I want to specifically recognize the elected officials who are with us today, including Governor Janet Mills, Secretary of State Shenna Bellows, Speaker of the House Ryan Fecteau, and the many state senators and representatives who are serving in the legislature. Would you please all stand up so we can recognize you and your service to the people of Maine? We can't talk about public service without taking a moment to pause and remember a friend of conservation who passed away earlier this week, Dick Barringer. Dick dedicated much of his life to public service as a former director of the Maine Bureau of Parks and Lands, commissioner of the Department of Conservation, director of the State Planning Office, and founding board member of the Muskie School for Public Service at the University of Southern Maine. We honor his contributions and his memory. In 12 days, on November 4th, you will have the opportunity to vote on two important ballot initiatives that will shape Maine's future. MCA and MCV encourage you to vote no on question 1. Question 1 is a direct attack on Maine's secure absentee voting system and would make it simply harder to vote. And we also encourage you to vote yes on question 2. Two years ago, almost to the day, a mass shooter in Lewiston killed 18 people and wounded 13 others. Question 2 would put into place common sense measures that will save lives and keep our schools and communities safe. Now, we have a great program for you tonight. Each of our speakers will share their words and stories, bringing us wisdom, passion, truth, and inspiration to light the path ahead. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing the brand new president of the League of Conservation Voters and my friend, Pete Maysmith. Now, Pete... Now, Pete is no stranger to LCV and the broader conservation voter movement. He served as LCV's Senior Vice President of campaigns since 2017. He also became the Executive Director of Conservation Colorado, which is the LCV affiliate in Maine, in 2009. And that's where I really got to know Pete when we were executive directors together. And in fact, I remember I convinced him to vote for Portland, Maine to bring our annual conference to, and he said, fine, but the following year you'll have to vote for Denver. And we were successful in that arrangement. Now, before his time at LCV, Pete spent many years working on campaign finance reform with the organization Common Cause. He is committed to strengthening democracy and is a member of the executive committee and board of America Votes. Pete graduated from Duke University and the University of Denver School of Law, and we actually go even further back from LCV. Pete started his career with a year-long fellowship with Green Corps, which is the field school for environmental organizing. He was part of the inaugural class, and I was in the 5th class of graduates. And even though he's now a muckety-muck, I know that organizing will always reside in the heart of Pete's leadership. So please join me in welcoming Pete Maysmith.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much. I'm Pete Maysmith, the president of LCV, the League of Conservation Voters, and I'm so excited to be here tonight. I'm so proud of LCV's partnership with Maine Conservation Voters. And as Maureen said, we go way back, nearly 30 years. I don't think I need to tell you this, but she is so fantastic at what she does. Yeah, that's right. Maureen's the best, and I am so lucky to call her a colleague and a friend. Thanks for all you do, Maureen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what is happening in Washington. You may have heard a few things about it. We have troops in the streets. We have a government shutdown. And the Trump administration is relentlessly attacking climate change, clean energy, and all the environmental protections that we have come to rely on for decades. But let's be clear, fixing what is wrong with DC will not happen in DC, it will happen in the states. I was at, I'm sure many of you were too, at the No Kings rally. I was at the one in Washington last weekend, and it was a great event, but more than that, what was so powerful were the millions of people that showed up at rallies and events all around the country, from large cities to small towns in every corner. Action in the states is what will solve this problem, and that's you all, so I want to start by saying thank you for everything that you do. I am really excited tonight to hear the stories and the poems from the 5 amazing speakers that are going to be coming up here in just a little bit. One of the things that we can do is make sure that the work we do connects with people's everyday lives. I think for too long, the work of the climate movement has seemed disconnected from day-to-day worries and challenges that people face. Now, geez, if there was ever the time to recalibrate our approach and to figure out how to connect with people and have an impact, it is right now. We all know that the second Trump administration has hit harder, faster, and been far more ruthless than the first term. We are all feeling it. People are hurting. They're scared. They're angry for good reason. I know I'm angry. And when it comes to climate, though, the threat remains real, present, and costly. People are losing their homes to massive floods and ferocious wildfires. Parents are keeping their kids inside because of wildfire smoke. Families are struggling with insurance premiums and utility bills that are skyrocketing. Trump's attacks on cleaner, cheaper, and faster renewable energy not only worsen the future impacts of a warming world, they have created a rising cost crisis for people right now. But there's good news to report. We have a generational opportunity in front of us. We can use this moment to hold this administration and its allies in Congress accountable. We can win the debate once and for all on energy. If we do that, we will make progress on clean energy that is both immediate and lasting. And that is how we will win on climate change. Nationwide, energy prices are rising twice as fast as inflation, while energy demand from data centers and more is spiking. I know you all are battling against a massive rate increase here in your state right now. Some of you may have attended meetings on this just in the last week. Thank you. Yet, instead of prioritizing the energy that is fastest and cheapest to deploy, the Trump administration is raising costs by canceling those projects and programs. To make matters worse, they are stubbornly forcing the country to build out less popular, slower to get online, and more expensive sources like coal and natural gas. The administration has forced an old, dirty coal power plant in Michigan to continue operating despite being due for retirement at the cost to ratepayers of $1 million a day. The newest coal plant in the country, in Texas, failed so catastrophically that it will be offline for 2 years. This is a colossal waste of resources when clean energy is ready right now. Trump has halted permitting for multiple wind farms. I don't think I need to tell you all this, including offshore wind, that could benefit Mainers with jobs, lower cost, and less pollution. Now, here's where the opportunity lies in this darkness, though. High energy bills rank right at the top with grocery and healthcare costs as what people are most worried about. The rate increases you're experiencing right now in Maine are a story being repeated in state after state, and everyone is looking for who to blame and what to do about it. The public wants politicians who support affordable solutions that work right now. That is why we must focus on affordability even more than we already have. Political leaders and climate groups must work to meet people where they are, and they're rightly stressed about the rising cost of everything. So now you may be thinking, well, you said clean energy is the cheapest, and we're in a cost crisis, so this should be easy. Everyone must know we must switch to renewables. Yeah, don't I wish. The challenge is that many people don't yet know that clean energy is cheapest. 20 years ago, you would hear solar and wind are luxuries we can't afford. The fossil fuel industry, Trump, utilities, they want us to believe that is still the case. The truth is, a quiet energy revolution has happened. A new analysis found that nearly all the states with a higher than average amount of wind and solar power are paying lower than average electric bills. Innovation, scale, good policy brought cost for solar and onshore wind down 75% and 62% respectively from 10 years ago. Now, overcoming outdated beliefs is difficult, especially when our opponents create and promote rampant misinformation. We are fighting the most powerful industry in the world, after all. That's where we all come in. We can give people something to be for that they can understand will help them with the problems they are facing today. The climate movement and our champions in office at the federal, state, and local level can put consumers first by supporting action on rising rates and building infrastructure that will lower their cost. We must push for funding to process permits. We must demand modernized, more efficient project reviews that include community engagement and result in faster build times for popular clean energy and efficiency programs. The good news is that state leaders across the country are already passing policies, including bipartisan policies, that put consumers first and deploy clean energy at scale, reduce pollution, and lower utility bills. In recent years, states such as Illinois, Michigan, and Massachusetts have all passed legislation to speed up solar and wind siting and permitting. Here in Maine, you've made so much progress. With Governor Mills's leadership, you've accelerated the timeline by which the state must achieve 100% clean energy by 10 years. You've established the Department of Energy Resources that will lead to more opportunities to bring more clean energy online. You've enacted storm preparedness and climate resiliency legislation that launched a flood risk preparedness program, uses federal funding for state disaster recovery funds, and helps homeowners make upgrades to protect their property against storm damage. This is a trend we're seeing in states after state where we work. Minnesota made sure utilities can't pass along the cost of data centers energy demand, their thirst, to consumers. Oregon established protections against data center rate hikes as well. Ohio passed a historic bipartisan energy law that improves the grid, requires utility transparency, and creates a framework to prioritize renewable energy development. In Michigan, lawmakers are working on a ratepayers' Bill of Rights. It would protect consumers from skyrocketing energy prices, poor service, and out-of-control utility executive pay, while reining in the undue influence of big energy CEOs. All of these policies will lead to more clean energy that is better for the environment, and they meet people where they are, desperate to get cost under control. In addition, these are policies that are about justice. They will ease the burden on people who currently spend the highest percentage of their income on energy cost, just as they help to replace dirty energy that has devastated communities that have historically borne more than their fair share of pollution with cleaner sources. We need more solutions that follow this model and more leaders to speak out in support of them. Now, we also have to call out politicians who are trying to effectively ban clean energy. We have to say it loudly. You are costing us money, and we are not going to take it. Trump, his Republican enablers in Congress, and utilities are forcing higher energy costs on families just to benefit wealthy polluter CEOs. What they are doing is cruel, corrupt, and just plain dumb. Now, even Republicans who started this are realizing their short-sighted policies will result in higher energy costs. Some are allegedly quietly urging the administration to back off their attacks on clean energy. I think this room is familiar with certain Republicans saying they're standing up to Trump behind closed doors. What that means, though, is that now is the time to make sure the pressure to reverse course becomes insurmountable. That is why we are already doing work to hold those responsible to account, running ads and field programs, hosting events, organizing, working with social media influencers, and much, much more. You're doing it right here by taking on your utilities rate hike. Trump has broken his promise to voters to cut utility bills in half in his first year. This broken promise is costing all of us. It also means that we are failing to meet the moment and lead the world in tackling the climate crisis. Energy affordability is a way to connect the challenges people are feeling every night around the kitchen table with the clean energy solutions we know that are good for cost, our health, and beating climate change. If we can tap into the anger around high bills, make the connection that Trump and his congressional Republican allies are to blame, we can get back to winning again. I'll close where I started. While Washington is horribly broken, the most critical way to keep making progress, to keep finding light in the darkness, is to work in states and our local communities, just like what you are doing right here. You're working to provide a better grid and hold utilities accountable, protecting our clean water from toxic chemicals like PFAS, prioritizing tribal sovereignty through education in the state legislature, partnering with local unions on solutions that benefit everyone. These are inspiring stories of the differences we can keep making in our communities, even in these unprecedented times. So, thank you. Thank you again for everything you do to support Maine conservation voters, and I hope you have a great rest of the evening. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Pete. And it's great to be here, everybody. Hi, I'm Anna Brown, and I am the board president for Maine Conservation Voters. And I'm deeply honored to serve in this role. Building on what Pete said, I am so deeply a believer in the power of policy and legislative change to shape the systems that we live in. But I also know that change actually begins in the imagination. Policy sets direction, but art helps us see where we need to go. And so it's with that context that I'm so honored to get to introduce a poet this evening. And this is a poet of our times, Samaa Abdurraqib. And I'm going to just tell you a little bit about Samaa because we're so grateful to have her here tonight. Samaa currently serves as the executive director of the Maine Humanities Council. Prior to working at Maine Humanities, Samaa held many positions, including at the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence, the ACLU of Maine, and was a visiting professor of women's studies at Bowdoin College. She's served on boards of several Maine nonprofits and has worked with many nonprofit organizations in the state, and has also worked as a leadership coach and a facilitator. Samaa was also recently certified as a Maine Master Naturalist, which allows her to lead teaching experiences for people who want to learn about the beings. Those are insects and plants and animals in our region. Recently, Samaa's poetry can be found in Cider Press Review, December Magazine, and Obsidian, Literature and Arts in the African Diaspora. She's the editor of From Root to Seed, Black, Brown, and Indigenous Poets Write the Northeast, and that was published in 2023. And she has been supported by residencies at Hunoaks and Monson Arts. Her most recent chapbook, Towards a Retreat, was published by Diode Editions in August of this year, and you might have actually read about it recently in the Portland Press Herald. I have it here. I encourage you to go find it. I had the honor of having it signed, my special copy tonight. So with that, I'd love to welcome you up to the stage, Samaa. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that introduction, Anna, and thank you to Maine Conservation Voters for the invitation. In April of 2024, I had the opportunity to witness the crane migration in Nebraska. So for a couple of nights, I got to witness 380,000 cranes roosting on the Platte River. And I'm a bird person, as you can. Cranes are just beautiful. I am so enthralled by their life story and the way they mate for life, the way their migration is ancient, the way they find each other at the end of the day after being out in the fields. And so this is a poem about cranes. It is a Markov sonnet, which is a form that was created by George Abraham, who's a Palestinian-American poet. It's a sonnet. It has 14 lines. It's very repetitive. So there are 14 lines, but it feels like there are more than 14 lines. And so, thank you. The poem is called Because Winter is Warming, and it starts with an epigraph. The crane sound is a Pleistocene vibration of cool fall air. Because winter is warming, I have been out in the field all day. Meet me on the stretch of land laid out before the riverbed, the same as we have done before and always done, heart beacons. Meet me on the stretch of land laid out before the riverbed, the same as we have done before and always done, heart beacons. When the winds change, we'll go again. The swell of our kettle a gyre. The same as we have done before and always done, heart beacons. When the winds change, we'll go again. The swell of our kettle a gyre. Come be primordial with me. In the fields, in the shallow water, hushed spirits descend. When the winds change, we'll go again. The swell of our kettle a gyre. Come be primordial with me. In the fields, in the shallow water, hushed spirits descend. Come spread out your angles with me. If I dance, will you dance in return? Come be primordial with me. In the fields, in the shallow water, hushed spirits descend. Come spread out your angles with me. If I dance, will you dance in return? In the early months, you and I are ice and water sprites. Come lengthen yourself. Come spread out your angles with me. If I dance, will you dance in return? In the early months, you and I are ice and water sprites. Come lengthen yourself. Move in a circle with me. Stillness next, tall and red crown calm. In the early months, you and I are ice and water sprites. Come lengthen yourself. Move in a circle with me. Stillness next, tall and red crown calm. Come echo the Pleistocene with me. Coiled trachea to breastbone. Move in a circle with me. Stillness next, tall and red crown calm. Come echo the Pleistocene with me. Coiled trachea to breastbone. When I speak, I am a vibration of ancient air. Our gathered voices, a constant chorus. Come echo the Pleistocene with me. Coiled trachea to breastbone. When I speak, I am a vibration of ancient air. Our gathered voices, a constant chorus. Bound by pattern. If I lose you in the day, I will find you at the water's edge. When I speak, I am a vibration of ancient air. Our gathered voices, a constant chorus. Bound by pattern. If I lose you in the day, I will find you at the water's edge. Dusk cycles until every happening smooths out into one straight line with no end point. Bound by pattern. If I lose you in the day, I will find you at the water's edge. Dusk cycles until every happening smooths out into one line with no end point. Before memory. If I lose you, I say to you, I will find you. I promise. Dusk cycles until every happening smooths out into one straight line with no end point. Before memory, if I lose you, I say to you, I will find you. I promise. You call back to me. Promise. 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 Because winter is warming, I have been out in the field all day. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. For those that don't know, my name is Sarah Woodbury. I am the new Legislative Director for Maine Conservation Voters and Maine Conservation Alliance. and I paid all those people to do that. I'm very excited that one of my first official duties is to introduce 4 amazing speakers who have been leading the charge on issues such as PFAS, an issue near and dear to my heart, Wabanaki sovereignty, energy fairness, and fair labor standards in the clean energy space. I'm delighted to introduce all the speakers, and then after I'm done through all the introductions, they will come up on stage. Please hold your applause until after I get through the introductions. And they'll now sit up here. Lucy will start, and then everybody will kind of come up and give their speech. So our first speaker tonight is Lucy Hochschartner. Lucy grew up in the Adirondack Mountains, saw the impacts of climate change, or the climate crisis firsthand, with droughts, extreme flooding, and the loss of winter. From a young age, she recognized that while we had the technological solutions to solve the problem, corporations and their political influence were standing in the way. So she dedicated herself to these issues, first through youth activism and then through legislative work as MCV's former Climate and Clean Energy Director. At MCV, she led the charge on several important issues, including energy fairness legislation, which would protect Maine people from skyrocketing energy costs. She is now the campaign director at Public Grids, where she is supporting a nationwide movement to deliver universal clean electricity by removing corporate profit and control. After Lucy, you will hear from Adam Nordell. Adam is a campaign manager at Defend Our Health, where he helps PFAS-impacted communities and their allies advocate for health protective policies in Maine and across the country. While all of our speakers tonight are incredible, I have a particular bias towards this introduction because I was lucky enough to work with Adam at Defend Our Health. He's a passionate advocate that uses the experience of losing his farm due to PFAS contamination from the land application of sludge to help fight for communities in Maine and across the country. His story is the perfect example of how one person fighting the good fight can make a positive difference in the lives of others. Adam's work at Defend has led to some first-in-the-nation policies to protect Maine farmers in Maine from PFAS contamination. And he is a wonderful human being, and I love him. Our next speaker will be Kaya Lolar. Kaya is a young writer, educator, and activist who is passionate about the art of storytelling and using it as a practice for change-making at all levels. Born and raised on Indian Island, Kaya is a citizen of the Bunawapskeg Nation in what is now called the state of Maine. Over the past 6 years, she has dedicated much of her time and energy towards prioritizing Wabanaki sovereignty through education. Kaya has served as a Wabanaki advisor to the Wabanaki studies efforts being made at the Department of Education for the past few years and presents to educators across the state alongside the Wabanaki studies specialist. During the first session of the 132nd legislature, Kaya led a youth campaign last session for LD 1543, an act to establish the Maine Green Schools Network. She graduated this past spring from Harvard University and now works as a Maine Environmental Education Association's Policy and Wabanaki Studies Coordinator, where she continues her comprehensive efforts towards a more holistic Wabanaki studies education for all Maine students, pushes forward a variety of environmental education-related solutions in the state legislature, and supports MIA as a leader in Maine's federal policy work regarding environmental education. Our final speaker will be Francis Eanes. Francis is the executive director of the Maine Labor Climate Council, a coalition of labor unions dedicated to building out the labor movement's vision and plan of action on climate and clean energy, and ensuring climate policies benefit working-class people and communities. Since launching in 2022, Francis and MLCC's have worked closely with MCV on a number of campaigns, including the successful effort to pass comprehensive offshore wind and port legislation in 2023, as well as passing bills this year to ensure Maine reaches 100% clean electricity by 2040. All with strong labor and equity standards. He leads MLCC's current campaign to weatherize and electrify mobile home park communities, part of MLCC's work to build working-class climate politics focused on affordability. Prior to joining MLCC, he was a founding member, of the Bates Education and Staff Organizations Organizing Committee, a wall-to-wall effort to unionize non-tenure track faculty and staff at Bates in the fall. He lives in Auburn with his wife and 2 young kids. So I would like to welcome the 4 speakers up here. You can now clap for how amazing they are.
I'm a lot taller than Sarah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And just I'm so honored to be up here with such incredible advocates and organizers. It's really means so much in some really dark times that we find ourselves in. As Sarah mentioned, I am going to talk a little bit about electricity and energy policy, which is not something that I knew a lot about. And in fact, I'd say I didn't know anything about it until I talked to someone who didn't have it. I had taken a couple classes about energy in college. I'd even testified before the legislature, had talked to the CEO of a utility company, thought I knew what I was doing. And then pretty soon after I moved to Maine, I got a call from someone who was calling me from a phone they had charged in the basement downstairs in an apartment that still had electricity because he had been disconnected. He had had to throw out all of his insulin when he was disconnected because it needed to be refrigerated, and he didn't know how he was going to be able to survive. And he wanted to know what I could do to help. And so we got on the phone, and he showed me pictures of his bills where he owed CMP more than $14,000, which is pretty insane. I, not being someone who is able to own a home, have never seen a bill that big for anything in my life. And we worked together. We talked to federal delegations. I combed through every rule and regulation of Chapter 845 in the PUC, got way into the weeds, and just have never felt so helpless in my life because there was nothing we could do. That is how it is supposed to work. In Maine, business as usual, and how the law is set up is that if you need electricity and you cannot pay, even if it's what you need to survive, the company can shut you off. So it was a really hard experience to learn, but I think it's something, regardless of whether you have ever struggled to pay your utility bill, you probably know that feeling of feeling really helpless. I think it's something that we're all feeling a lot right now with the shutdown, with ICE agents in the streets, with feeling really out of control with a lot of our elections. This is something that, I was just talking to folks as we were getting food. It's you feel it really deep in your bones that things are feeling bleak. But I was really lucky after that experience to get the chance to work at MCV, which is just such an incredible organization. And they said, Lucy, what would it look like to really think about what a more full solution would be to this problem that you're telling us about, rather than just going person by person? And what MCV does so well is think about what does the world we want to see look like, and how much power is it going to take to get there, and who do we need to be in coalition with to get there. So we had some really great conversations as a team and thought the world that we want to live in is one where everyone has the power that we need to revitalize our communities. We have clean electricity, and everyone has electricity, that it's guaranteed no matter what. But we realized that was going to take a lot of power to do because we're up against some really, really big corporations, whether it is fossil fuel companies who keep gas on our electricity market here in New England that raises prices and pollutes our communities and our climate, or whether it's our utility companies right here in Maine that made more than $210 million in profit last year while disconnecting thousands of people. These are big corporations that we need to take seriously. We need to think about how many people is it going to take to win. But the really cool thing about energy, that even if you guys are oh my gosh, Lucy, it's so boring, it's so wonky, what do I think about energy? It's something that affects everybody. No matter what issue you care about, it is going to take electricity to get it done. If you want to build new affordable housing, they're all going to need to have electricity. If you want to do public transit so that people have the freedom to move where they want to move, it's going to take electricity. If you want to get fossil fuels off the system, it's going to take electricity. If you're someone who just wants to be able to turn on the lights, it's going to take electricity. And so you can kind of work with anyone on this issue. And so we had the opportunity to work with just the most amazing Senator Ann Carney, who's here tonight, who is, yes, give her a round of applause. She doesn't know this, but she's so awesome that I talk about her behind her back, and when I do, I call her Queen Anne. So Queen Anne got us all together and was just so wonderful in thinking about how we would take that first step. You know, we may not all be able to have electricity tomorrow, but what can we do today to make sure we're moving in that direction? And together we brought so many people, because just environmentalists, just people who care about climate change isn't going to be quite enough power, but it's a lot. We have a lot of people who are already feeling the effects of climate change. But then we also need the workers who work in the system that you're going to hear a lot more about from Francis, because they're the people who are going to get it done. They know how to work the system, they know how to do the poles and wires. And we've gotten a lot done with just those two groups, but we're starting to see that maybe that's still not enough power. And we actually need people who can't pay their bills as well. And so Senator Carney got us all together and helped us write this bill called LD 1949, the Energy Fairness Act, that if passed, we had really great input from consumer advocates who work directly with people who are facing disconnection. It would protect people permanently with medical conditions or disabilities, so people like the person I talked to. It would do utility accountability, so making sure that utilities are only charging us for the actual electricity and not the costs of the rate case that they're running right now, for instance. And it would also make it easier to put more clean energy onto the system and make sure that it's cheap and clean moving forward. And so that was something that we all got to work on together as environmentalists, consumer advocates, workers, and it's still in the legislature. So I'm just going to leave you with one thought, which is that this is all really difficult, it's really hard, but there are so many people who can be involved, particularly if you think outside of the box. This is a room full of people who care about the climate, but outside this room, there's people who are just thinking about whether they can turn on the lights. And so I hope that you'll look at your utility bill after this, and that you'll talk to someone about it, and then maybe you'll even call your state legislator to tell them to pass LD 1949. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucy. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak today, Maine conservation voters, and thanks to you all for the important environmental work that you do. We've been working on PFAS for years now, and we know that these chemicals are bad news. We know that PFAS persist in the environment and in the human body for far too long. This isn't news at this point. We know that they impact our health in unacceptable ways, and we've seen the toll they take on impacted communities. We understand PFAS for the environmental justice issue they represent. I think about billowing white mountains of PFAS-laden firefighting foam floating off the former Brunswick Naval Air Station, down Mare Brook, into Harpswell Cove, and on out into the Gulf of Maine. I think about closed clam flats. I think about third-generation dairy farmers forced to euthanize their cattle. Homesteaders learning that their backyard chickens are laying contaminated eggs. Rural communities discovering that the well water they've been drinking for decades is unsafe. I think about contaminated farms. I think about the dust that rises behind the plow and the people that breathe that dust. But I also think about the people who, in the face of trauma and loss, refuse to surrender our vision of the world as it should be and as it could be to a degradingly contaminated current moment. PFAS have demonstrated for us the strength of our convictions and the power of a diverse, well-organized community working together. We're now leading the nation by turning off the tap on PFAS in consumer products, and impacted well owners are getting free whole house water filters. We're protecting farms by banning the land application of sludge. We're supporting many of the PFAS impacted farmers while getting PFAS out of the food supply. We're working to expand access to well water tests and to blood tests for low-income Mainers, and to recall the AFFF firefighting foam so that nothing like the Brunswick spill can ever happen again in Maine. Where have we fallen short of our goals? Operating with near monopolistic power, the billion-dollar Casella Corporation has continued to dump PFAS into the territory of the Penawanaupskag Nation, the Wolastoqey Nation in New Brunswick, and the low-income rural community in Unity Township. And forgive me for my Anglophone accent. For example, when it rains on the Juniper Ridge landfill, water seeps through the mountain of garbage, collecting PFAS in a toxic substance called leachate. Casella is already filtering PFAS from the landfill leachate in their home state of Vermont. Here in Maine, the corporation sends untreated leachate to a wastewater plant which discharges directly into the beautiful Penobscot River near Indian Island, while pressuring the state to significantly expand their landfill operations in the Penobscot Nation's doorstep. In what way does Casella's pollution compound Maine's ongoing failure to repair relations and recognize the tribe's sovereignty? Are we as an environmental community willing to accept this as the state of things? While other landfills in Maine are quietly partnering to stabilize and dry sludge and prevent leachate from impacting the environment, Casella has claimed that landfill sludge is too wet to manage, and that they need to landfill Massachusetts garbage to soak up the moisture. Yet almost 3 years after they gained permission to accept out-of-state waste at our publicly owned landfill, the seriousness of their purpose falls into question, as we learn that they have been meanwhile diverting Maine's wastewater sludge away from Juniper Ridge to other for-profit destinations, Fredericton, New Brunswick, and Unity Township, Maine. In New Brunswick, Casella sends Maine's sewage sludge to a Canadian firm called Envirom, who composts it at a facility next to and directly uphill from the Devon Indian Reservation number 30, which is the land of the Wolastoqey Nation. Since sludge activities began at the site, tribe members have documented a complete loss of macroinvertebrate life and a sudden increase in foam in a stream that flows downhill from the facility. One tribe member was planning on fasting on tribal land near the Nashwauk River, but he reported that the smell has gotten so bad that he was unable to stay. Are we willing to accept this? What other impacts does this facility have on tribal resources? We can get a sense of what's at risk for the tribe from a sludge composting operation here in Maine. Casella is the most recent operator of the Hawk Ridge sewage sludge composting facility in Unity Township, a low-income rural community with no local government. In the 4 years since the Maine legislature banned the use of sludge as a compost or fertilizer, Hawk Ridge has continued to compost sludge from Maine and Massachusetts before selling it out of state. Maine DEP recently pressured Casella to close the facility after identifying a PFAS groundwater plume testing as high as 150,000 parts per trillion, 7,500 times our state's drinking water standard. This pollution exceeds the famously terrible contamination in nearby Fairfield. Casella's plume has impacted numerous neighboring drinking water wells and, according to Maine DEP, has also impacted nearby wetlands and surface water streams. Are we willing to accept this? Who will we hold responsible to clean up the Hawk Ridge groundwater plume? PFAS have bioaccumulated near Hawk Ridge to the extent the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife has said it is unsafe to eat any venison or wild turkey harvested in the area. Think about this. In the sludge-impacted communities of Kennebec and Waldo County, more than 1 out of every 5 kids grows up food insecure. Many rural Mainers depend on wild harvested meat to feed their families. For how many generations have food insecure kids been drinking poisoned water and eating poisoned food? This issue challenges our vision of Maine as it should be, as it could be. But we know who we are, and we know what we believe in, and we know how powerful we are when we work together. For the sake of our tribal neighbors, and for the sake of our other neighbors elsewhere in rural Maine, we need to hold polluters accountable for the full cost of preventing and cleaning up PFAS contamination, and for all of the externalized costs of pollution borne by those of us who have been exposed to the chemicals. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. Gosh, I applaud those of you who do this sort of public speaking on the regular. I have not been excited about this part, but I am excited to talk to you all about some very important issues tonight. So thank you to MCV for making space for Wabanaki voices both on and off the stage. Last October, I actually was able to attend my first evening for the environment and got to hear all about the power of youth advocacy in the instance of the successful youth-led fossil fuel case in Montana. And this spring, I had the privilege of coordinating a youth campaign for LD 1543, an act to establish the Maine Green Schools Network, and I was able to witness the power of youth civic engagement firsthand. Another former fellow of the MIA Changemakers program and I worked closely with 8 high school juniors and seniors from across what is now called Maine, learning, teaching, and strategizing together to support this bill. And with thanks to many other educators, advocates, and partner organizations in our network, and in large part because of these incredible high schoolers, LD 1543 was passed. Personally, very exciting, yes. Personally, though, I believe that the success of this campaign did not rely on the success of the bill in the legislature. These 8 high schoolers came to us at the start of the session with varying levels of experience within advocacy spaces. Only 2 had ever written testimony before or even knew what that meant. And 6 who could make it to the bill's public hearing were testifying before a legislative committee for the very first time. This is not to say that any of them lacked the desire for change or proper drive to do so beforehand. In fact, as many of you know, Maine is a powerhouse when it comes to our youth climate justice movement. But policy is tough when you don't know the system inside and out, and so many of our youth just don't know where to start. Now, I'm going to shift momentarily over to the other portion of my job as Wabanaki Policy and Wabanaki Studies Coordinator, but I promise these pieces will tie back together eventually. I first want to start with a couple of numbers. In 2023, the World Economic Forum reported that while Indigenous peoples make up only 5% of the global population, they protect and steward 80% of the Earth's remaining biodiversity. This number probably feels a bit shocking to many, but it doesn't totally lack sense. We must remember that as Indigenous people, we are and will always be the first stewards of this land. We built a connection with the living earth before anyone else and have passed this knowledge down for generations. So in the midst of the climate crisis, why aren't we holding these critical voices at the very center? Truly, I think a large part of it is because the vast majority of people aren't aware of exactly what I just outlined. They don't realize the gravity of this connection. And this is where education comes in. In 2022, MIA partnered to conduct a research survey in hopes of gaining a clearer understanding on how we can better meet the needs of students and educators in the environmental education space. A total of 917 educators, representing all 16 counties, responded, and we found that the top most requested professional development need was Wabanaki studies. Clearly, educators see the need, and this was their call for support. Coincidentally, 2022 was the same year that the Department of Education hired a Bunawebskeg citizen and experienced educator who went on to become the state's very first Wabanaki Studies specialist. This position alone has advanced the state of Wabanaki Studies education across this land now called Maine exponentially over just a few years. While this is certainly a success worth celebrating, it's only the beginning. Many people also don't realize that Maine actually passed a law requiring that Wabanaki Studies is taught in all Maine schools all the way back in 2001. This law is older than me. So I urge us all now to make a promise that this is only one step along a long road of commitment to this crucial work. During the upcoming legislative session, MIA will be collaborating with the Wabanaki Alliance to expose youth across what is now called Maine to the lawmaking process, with Wabanaki youth at the center to guide the direction of the work. We will be teaching and learning together as we follow along with a handful of current legislation related to topics like Wabanaki studies and tribal sovereignty, including a bill to ensure a permanent place for the currently temporary DOE Wabanaki studies work. After the public hearing for the Green Schools Bill last session, many people, including members of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee, approached our youth team to comment on how much the energy in the room shifted with those 6 youth voices present. So let's get more youth to the State House and show them how to make the changes that they want to see. We cannot make this change alone. So as we move forward with this Wabanaki Policy Youth Initiative, empowering youth across these traditional Wabanaki homelands that we find ourselves standing on now, we ask for your support in strengthening education and uplifting Indigenous voices as we move forward towards a more climate-just future together. Thank you.
Thanks to MCV for having me here. Again, my name is Francis Eanes. I'm the director of the Maine Labor Climate Council. And I love Maine a lot, but I actually grew up in southwestern Pennsylvania in the mountains. Steel country, yeah, there you go. Coal country for more than a century. Now it's natural gas country. And really close to my hometown, Uniontown, the Battle of Blair Mountain over 100 years ago. Dozens of miners literally lost their lives, hundreds engaged in a massive pitched battle with their bosses to organize what then was the backbone of the economy, the coal fields. And they fought not just for fair wages, but for dignity on the job, for the right to organize together with their fellow workers to get out of these company towns. They did it again 30, 40 years later, during the 1930s, during the rise of the CIO, to organize steel and then auto, right? This is the Gilded Age, workers coming together to build power, to fight against corporate titans of their era. That economy that we look back on now, that's the fossil fuel economy. And today, it's still the most dense, most union-dense part of our economy. As all of you know, we're now in the largest energy transition since perhaps the Industrial Revolution. And with massive urgency and so many reasons, we need to transition that fossil fuel economy to a clean energy economy. That is a really thorny proposition for tens, hundreds of thousands of workers, again, who fought and in many cases, some cases, lost their lives to organize that piece of the economy. There's no one way to do this. But that's why we as an organization, we're a coalition of labor unions, have come together here in the state of Maine and with sister coalitions in now 16 states in the US to fight for a different vision. We have another Gilded Age, and we have to fight together these twin crises of climate and inequality. We can't do one without fighting the other. At the end of the day, this is about power, and we need to build more power to make this transition happen on both fronts. I'm really proud that we've done some of that work here together in this state with some of you in the legislature and many other partnered organizations and allies, and especially with MCV, fighting side by side for really great legislation just in the last 3 years that have set an example of how we can build strong labor and job quality and workforce development standards into clean energy and climate policy. We did it just a few months ago, as some of you have said, when we passed, and many of you here in the legislature passed a bill that accelerates the timeline by which Maine will achieve 100% clean electricity, now by 2040, 10 years sooner than our previous goal of 2050. 2 years ago, as was previously mentioned, we passed comprehensive offshore wind legislation that sets strong labor, fishery protections, and environmental standards for the build-out of offshore wind here in the state. This fight was not always easy. Some of these bills got vetoed, but I'm really proud of the work that we did together. Coalition work is really hard, especially when some of the signal fights of my generation, the last 15 years, have pitted labor against environment. That's not going anywhere, but we can make progress together by actually organizing out the clean energy economy and showing a pathway for workers and the unions that they have built, that there is a place for them in this new economy. I'm proud of that work, and one of the best moments that I can remember from that offshore wind fight was when a young apprentice electrician from IBW 1253 got up in front of the Labor Committee, this is early in the process at the public hearing, and he said, you know what, I don't actually believe in climate change. I'm pretty sure the climate's varied forever in the past and forever in the future. This is just how it is. But you know what? I would love to work in an offshore wind port 15 minutes from my house. I would love to be home with my family every night, not be chasing work on the road. I think offshore wind's a really cool technology, and I'm excited to help bring it to Maine. And you could tell, I remember watching this public hearing was hours long, legislators looking up from their phones going like, who is this person? Like, there's a bunch of enviros and a few like well-educated labor folks here, but like, who's this person here talking about like not believing in climate change? It was great and it was riveting, and to me, it's the synecdoche of what we can build when we have a broader view of who belongs in the climate movement. This is the coalition we need to build if we want to really move at the pace and scale that the climate crisis demands. And yet that is not enough. I think for many of us, as we saw what happened just about a year ago, realize that like there is far more that we need to build and who needs to be part of this coalition if we're going to get to where we need to go. As amazing as the legislation is that we passed here in Maine, to actually build the projects that we need to get to 100% clean energy by 2040, that means a massive build out of actual infrastructure, often in rural communities, whether it's solar or wind or battery storage or transmission lines. These are actual people, communities, neighborhoods that in many cases are feeling alienated politically from where we are, feeling alienated entirely from the climate and clean energy transition. This is an organizing problem. And so our solution, and this is just one piece, it's what we see as what we can contribute organizationally, is to go out and organize in mobile home park communities. We're now in 15 different parks, and we started this 6 months ago, just saying, how can we actually meet folks around affordability, around energy costs, and around home comfort? So we go into parks and we knock doors, we bring folks together to meetings where they can learn about the state's really generous program that's specifically for manufactured housing, for heat pumps and for weatherization, help them navigate through the process of getting into these programs, and do it with good union jobs when we do the installations. And what's really interesting is that folks can save almost $1,000 a year in a manufactured house with a typical weatherization and heat pump. And if you're on Social Security, making $15,000 or $20,000 a year, that's a big deal. But what's really interesting to me, and I think the biggest learning curve for us, is that as much as affordability is central for folks and the cost of living squeeze, particularly in mobile home communities, is acute, we can't actually get to that conversation around energy affordability, let alone climate and future clean energy projects that might be coming for rural communities. We can't even get there until we first listen and meet folks where they are today. And I can tell you, the issues that we hear when we go to the door is there's a tree hanging over my roof and it could fall in the next storm. Management should have cut it 2 years ago, but they didn't because that's a cost to them. Or our sewage is backing up. It's been this way for 4 years. We've called the town, we've called everyone, and management isn't dealing with it. And so we've gone back to our roots in the labor movement. Union Organizing 101. You bring everyone in a workplace together. You let them tell their stories. You let them realize that my story actually might sound similar to your story. And together we can come up with 3 or 4 demands that 70, 80, 90% of us actually agree on, even though none of us are here because we're self-selecting. We're just here because we happen to live in the same community. And then support residents, many of whom have never organized before, don't even think their neighbors care about these issues, together in a shared campaign to actually address immediate, day-to-day, acute issues facing them in their park. And when they do that, it is truly powerful to see folks realize that they have agency, they have skills, they have relationships with their neighbors, they have a voice. It is powerful. That's organizing. That's a new muscle. Anyone can do it. It's not rocket science, but it does take practice, and it does take doing. And what I can tell you is, as we do that, as we go into parks and are there for weeks or months together, we build trust with folks where we then can come back and talk about heat pumps and weatherization. And then after that, we can talk about the solar project happening down the street from them. It's a different conversation when you've built trust and showed up for folks. We are far from figuring this all out. This is a very imperfect, emergent thing, but it feels like the right thing to try and meet the moment. We're excited for this, and we'd invite any of you who are interested. You can do this in your community. We can teach you. We're learning as we go, and we'd welcome anyone to join that fight with us. Thank you.
So we just want to say thank you very much to our 4 amazing speakers, Lucy, Adam, Kaya, and Francis, also to Samaa for her beautiful poem. As we continue to face more threats to the environment from the federal level, their work shows the importance of organizing and fighting for these issues at the state level. I know there are legislators in the room tonight. The work that we are doing at the state level is so important to protect the health and environment of all Mainers. Maine can and should be bold when it comes to protecting the people in this state and protecting the environment. So please, let's give them all another round of applause and thank them for their hard work.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Ginn. I'm the president of Maine Conservation Alliance. It's so great to see all of you here. I've been tilting at this windmill for a long time, and I know from the gray hairs in this room that there are a lot of you that have shared that journey. And I tell you, for me, when I listen to these speakers, what fills my heart with hope is to see first this class of new leaders coming forward with very powerful stories about Maine and about their experience, because those are the kinds of stories that we need to be building on. The second thing that occurs to me is that this is a diverse coalition. This is not the nature lovers of the 1970s. These are people focused on health. These are people focused on fair labor. This is people who are focused on livelihoods. These are farmers. That's the kind of coalition that we're going to need in order to win on these issues. We need that diversity. We need that strength. Yeah, everybody has their own specific issue. And one of our challenges here as a organization is how do we honor the specific challenges of each organization, but at the same time bring us all together around a common focus and a common outcome. That's what's the work ahead for all of us, I think. And I think today we're seeing the fruit of that investment and that focus over these many years that we've all been working on these issues. I always think optimistically about the future, because that's maybe who I am. And I'm always inspired by the Reverend Theodore Parker, who in 1853 said something that Martin Luther King paraphrased many, many years later, which is, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I really believe that. But there are two important asterisks to that quote. The first asterisk is that it's an arc, not a straight line. And we who navigate in the fog here in Maine know that we often have to change course and adjust our direction. And we're facing one of those existential moments here today. But the arc does bend towards the future. Secondly, it bends because people push and pull to bend it. It's people who yearn for justice, people who yearn for freedom, who yearn for clean water, clean air, a decent life in their communities. Those are the real engines of the moral universe that is bending us towards justice. And so we need to work together in order to build the movement that honors that, and to push and to pull. And we've got a lot of pushing and pulling to do in the next few years in order to bend that arc in the direction that we want to see it. Those are the challenges that are ahead of us. I want to thank the organizers of tonight, particularly Stacey Haynes and Chloe Hoffman, who have been so great in putting this wonderful event together, this gathering of all the people that are focused on these issues. And I hope that as we go forth tonight, we will think about how we can reach across to our neighbors, how we can get out the vote on the important issues that are coming just in a few weeks, and how we can bend the arc of the moral universe towards justice. Thank you all. Travel safely. Have a good evening.